a lesson that that we have resources for, and kind of reflect on the way that you did the lesson and what made you think. And I've got, yeah?
Okay. Yeah.
So, could you just tell me the name of the lesson and how you planned this particular lesson?
Yeah, it was a lesson about chocolate and is it good for us? And my basic thinking behind it was that I wanted pupils to develop an idea of what evidence was, because I felt that you couldn't have an argument if you didn't understand what evidence was, because we know that a high quality argument has evidence within it. So one of the things that I wanted to do was make sure pupils knew what evidence was and how it worked. So what I did was try to pick a really easy to understand and common theme, and I figured, well, everybody knows about chocolate. Everybody's tried some, if not, so it was something that they could always relate to. So I first started off with asking them their opinion, with the idea of do they think chocolate is good for us? And actually it was quite mixed in the room. People sort of said, no, it's quite bad for us, it contains lots and lots of fats. And other people sort of said, well, yes it does, but it increases your mood and that sort of thing. So they were very sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Very subjective evidence to begin with, and we talked about what you would believe on packaging, and if it just said, we think it does this, would you believe it? And a lot of kids said, oh no, you wouldn't. And so we developed our ideas on from that by using an evidence map, and on the evidence map it had several different excerpts from different articles and the source of the article. Some of the articles contained data, some of them didn't, and basically the kids had to then go around and analyse the information from the different sources and whether they trusted the source. And it was from things like a website called www.ilovechocolate.com, and they had to think about whether it was biased or not, and actually consider whether they trusted the evidence. And then we talked about what made reliable evidence and what didn't, and then eventually they were going to produce a full document using a writing frame to talk about whether they did think that chocolate was good for them or not. And then we concluded the lesson by having another vote on the idea. And I said to them, if you're voting and I ask you why, you need to come up with some evidence this time to support your argument. And so we did that, and actually a lot of them had much more quantitative ideas behind their arguments, and so they were much higher quality than they were to begin with, so I was quite pleased with that.
Right. So how did you teach it, that lesson?
I made it very structured and very strict timings to the lesson, because I felt that it was quite easy for pupils to wander off task and start talking about things that weren't chocolate, and it was also quite easy for them not to understand what I was trying to get them to get out of the lesson. So it was very short timings, very structured, lots and lots of resources for them to fill in and to use, and to keep everything on paper, keep them moving in the lesson time.
So what happened? Then you planned this lesson. How did it go? What happened?
It went really very well. Yeah. The group that I used with the activity are quite a talkative, quite a chatty bunch anyhow. So I figured that they'd be pretty good at joining in and asking each other their opinions. And they did it relatively quickly and filled in all the bits and pieces. And they were very good at group discussion. So when we did start to talk about things like, well, actually, if it's your opinion, would you trust it if it was on the back of the chocolate packet? And they said, no, definitely not. But by keeping the strict timings, it was easy to move them on to the next activity and keep it all framed out in the way that it should be.
So, on reflection, what did you think about the lesson?
I thought it was very successful. They asked a lot of really good questions, and also began to look at the sources of information and what constitutes evidence, because a lot of the pupils before would have just used very superficial opinion-based evidence, and now they were beginning to use data and actually question, well, actually there's no method on this data, so how do we know then that the data is good data, and beginning to really think in depth about questioning the evidence that they were going to use. So I felt it was a very successful lesson, and it led on, as an initial starter, it would lead on to lots more other lessons.
And what year group did you do this with?
And that was with year 9.
Right. And is there anything you would do differently if you were doing this lesson again?
Honestly, no, because I thought it was very, very successful. The only thing I perhaps would change was I did it period 6, which is obviously at the end of the day, and they were quite chatty at that point in time, but I would have moved it a bit earlier in the day if I'd had that opportunity. But I didn't, and it still worked well.
Right. What do you think would have happened had you moved it earlier on in the day?
I think we possibly would have completed a little bit more, because they would have been been working a little bit faster, so I would have got their end result, which was a structured piece of writing. I would have got that as a further developed piece of work. But actually what I saw of their work was good enough that I could still assess how well they were doing.